When a disabled black boy crosses paths with a racist cop on a quiet street, an act of injustice sparks a viral outcry. But as tensions rise, an unexpected intervention from the highest office in the land changes everything. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street. Marcus wheeled himself along the uneven pavement, the rhythmic creak of his wheelchair breaking the silence. The 12-year-old boy, slight in build but with an unmistakable determination in his dark eyes, was heading home from the community center. His backpack rested loosely against his back, its frayed straps hinting at years of use. Despite the challenges he faced daily, both from his disability and the world's prejudices, Marcus carried a quiet strength that belied his small frame. Tonight, however, his usually steady composure felt shaken. The streetlights flickered, their dim glow barely illuminating his path. He tightened his grip on the wheelchair's rims, quickening his pace as the distant hum of a car engine grew louder. A sharp beam of headlights flooded the street as a police cruiser rolled to a stop beside him. The car door slammed and Officer Hank Mitchell emerged. Tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform was pristine, the badge on his chest catching the faint light. His piercing blue eyes scanned Marcus with a mix of suspicion and disdain, his jaw set in a hard line. "Hey kid," Hank barked, his voice slicing through the stillness. Marcus froze, his fingers trembling slightly as they rested on the wheelchair's handles. "Why, yes, sir," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "What are you doing out here this late?" Hank demanded, stepping closer. His boots crunched against the gravel, the sound echoing ominously. "I'm just heading home," Sir Marcus replied, his tone measured but laced with a faint edge of fear. Hank narrowed his eyes, his hand resting on his holstered baton. "Don't play games with me. What's in the bag?" Marcus hesitated, glancing at his backpack. "It's just my books and snacks from the center," he said softly, lifting the bag slightly as if to prove his point. Hank leaned in, his presence looming over the boy. "Open it," he commanded. Marcus hesitated but complied, unzipping the bag with shaky hands. The contents were exactly as he described an old textbook, a half-eaten sandwich and a water bottle. Yet Hank's suspicion didn't waver. "You think I'm stupid, kid," Hank snapped, his voice rising. "Kids like you don't just walk around here for no reason." The words stung, their weight heavier than the boy's wheelchair. Marcus bit his lip, refusing to let the tears welling in his eyes spill over. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he managed, his voice trembling but resolute. Hank's expression darkened. He straightened, his hand gripping the baton now. "That so? Let's see some ID." Marcus swallowed hard. "I don't have an ID, sir. I'm only 12. "Convenient," Hank muttered, stepping back but keeping his glare locked on Marcus. The cop's tone dripped with a mix of mockery and aggression, his bias is evident in every word and movement. He looked at the wheelchair, then back at the boy, as if questioning his very existence on that street. The moment stretched into a suffocating silence. Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on him. He had faced judgment before, teachers who doubted his abilities, classmates who teased him, but this was different. This was power wielded against him, unfairly and without restraint. "I'm going to ask you again," Hank said, his voice low and threatening. "Why are you really here?" Marcus lifted his chin slightly, finding a flicker of courage deep within. "I told you the truth," he said, his voice firmer now. For a moment, Hank seemed taken aback, but the shock quickly turned to anger. He stepped closer, his face inches from Marcus's. "Watch your tone, boy," he spat. The tension was thick, the scene a cruel reflection of a world where judgment and prejudice often overshadow innocence and truth. Marcus's small frame seemed dwarfed, not only by Hank's physical presence, but by the systemic weight the officer represented. Yet, in that moment, Marcus's quiet defiance became a beacon, a reminder that even in the face of injustice, strength could emerge from the most unexpected places. The air was thick with unease as Marcus gripped the edges of his wheelchair, his knuckles turning white. The street, usually quiet at this hour, seemed to hum with the tension between him and Officer Hank Mitchell. The cop's stance grew more aggressive, his eyes scanning Marcus, as though searching for a reason to escalate further. "Turn out your pockets," Hank demanded, his voice laced with impatience. "I don't have anything," Sir Marcus replied, his voice shaking but steady enough to carry an edge of defiance. Did I ask for excuses? Hank snapped, his hand hovering over his baton. The authoritative weight in his tone made Marcus flinch, but he didn't reach for his pockets immediately. From across the street, a flicker of movement caught Marcus's eye. A young man, no older than his early 20s, stood frozen on the sidewalk, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. David Turner, a neighborhood resident, had been walking home when the scene unfolded. His instinct to capture injustice overtook his hesitation, and he began recording. "Hey, what's going on here?" David shouted, stepping closer, though maintaining a safe distance. Hank shot a glare in his direction. "None of your business. Move along." "It's public property," David countered, his voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "I'm not interfering." The cop's jaw tightened, his focus momentarily splitting between Marcus and David. Sensing the shift, Marcus inhaled deeply. Despite his fear, he forced himself to meet Hank's gaze. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked, his voice quiet but deliberate. "I haven't done anything wrong." Hank leaned down, his face just inches from Marcus's. "You don't get to question me, boy," he spat, the venom in his words stinging more than a slap. "You think you're some kind of saint just because you're in a wheelchair." The words hung in the air, cutting through Marcus like a blade. He glanced at David, whose recording had now attracted another onlooker, a middle-aged woman clutching her purse, her face etched with worry. "Sir," she called hesitantly, "he's just a child. Maybe you should let him go." "Stay out of this," Hank barked, pointing a finger at her. His face flushed with frustration, veins bulging in his neck. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The humiliation burned, but deeper still he felt a resolve building. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, a memory from years ago when he had come home crying after being bullied. "Never let them make you small, Marcus," she had said, her hands firm on his shoulders. "You're more than their words. You're stronger than their hate." The memory gave him the strength to speak again. "I don't deserve this," Marcus said, his voice firmer now. "You don't know me, and you don't have the right to treat me like this." Hank's eyes flared. "I don't have the right," he snarled. "You think you're above the law?" He stepped back, pulling out his handcuffs. Marcus's breath hitched. "What are you doing?" "You're resisting an officer," Hank said, the lie slipping easily from his lips. "That's enough reason to bring you in." The onlookers murmured in protest, but none stepped forward. David's phone stayed steady, capturing every word, every action. "This isn't right," he shouted, his voice shaking with anger. "You're arresting a kid for no reason." "Shut your mouth, or you'll be next," Hank growled. The sound of handcuffs clicking sent a chill through Marcus. Hank roughly grabbed his wrist, yanking him forward, causing the wheelchair to jolt. Marcus winced, but he didn't cry out. His silence was its own form of resistance, his way of maintaining dignity in the face of degradation. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Please." But Hank didn't respond. He lifted Marcus out of the wheelchair, his movements rough and careless, as though handling a lifeless object rather than a living, breathing child. The onlookers gasped audibly now, their protests growing louder. "This is wrong," the woman shouted, taking out her phone to join David in recording. The scene had escalated into chaos. More people began to gather, their voices a mixture of outrage and disbelief. Hank's authority, once absolute, now seemed fragile under the weight of so many eyes. Suddenly, David's phone buzzed with a notification. The recording had gone live, and viewers were pouring in by the second. Comments scrolled across the screen. "This is disgusting. Where is justice? Does anyone know this kid?" And then a private message popped up from an unexpected source. "Keep recording. We're watching," it read, signed with a name David couldn't believe: Donald Trump. As Marcus endured the humiliation, another memory surfaced, a day when he had begged his mother not to make him go to school. "I can't," he had said through tears. "They'll laugh at me again." His mother had knelt beside him, her hands cradling his face. "Marcus, you were born to stand tall, even if you can't walk. They'll try to knock you down, but you have something they don't. Courage. Don't ever forget that. Her words now echoed in his heart. He looked Hank square in the eye, his voice trembling but clear. You're wrong about me, he said. And one day you'll see that. Hank hesitated for the briefest moment, his grip loosening slightly. But the growing crowd and the live recording pushed him back into his facade of control. He dragged Marcus toward the cruiser, oblivious to the storm brewing online. As the live stream gained traction, a flurry of tweets and shares brought it to the attention of media outlets and activists. Hashtags like Justice for Marcus and Stop Police Brutality began trending within minutes. Meanwhile, a sleek black SUV pulled up a few blocks away, unnoticed by the commotion. Inside, a man in a tailored suit spoke into his phone. Yes, Mr. President, we're on it. The situation is under control. The crowd's protests grew louder as Hank opened the back door of the cruiser. You'll regret this, David shouted, stepping closer. Hank turned to snarl a retort, but the sound of approaching sirens interrupted him. Two unmarked cars skidded to a stop, their doors flying open. Out stepped a pair of Secret Service agents, their presence commanding immediate attention. Hank's grip faltered as one of the agents approached him, his expression unreadable. Officer Mitchell, we need to have a word. The crowd fell silent, their eyes darting between the agents and the cop. Marcus, still trembling, watched as the balance of power shifted. For the first time that night, hope flickered in his heart. In that moment, the downfall of Robert Whitman began to crystallize. The officers, unconvinced by his defense, turned their attention back to the community's new heroine. Ma'am, we apologize for the inconvenience. You are free to stay seated right where you are. The other officer declared, effectively siding with Evelyn and the supportive public. This decision sparked a small cheer among the passengers, a sound that felt like the ringing of justice to Evelyn's ears. Meanwhile, Whitman's face turned a shade paler, the reality of his situation sinking in. The realization that his actions were not only wrong but now also viral, subject to the harsh judgment of public opinion, was a bitter pill to swallow. How will this affect the rest of Whitman's day and possibly his career? What would you do if you witnessed such an injustice? The officers made their decision clear, and Evelyn remained seated, her demeanor unshaken despite the ordeal. The resolution of the conflict began to take shape in the most dignified manner possible. The officers spoke to Whitman in hushed tones on the side, their words firm and their intent unmistakable. Within moments, it was announced that Whitman would be facing disciplinary action for his conduct. The murmurs of approval from the passengers underscored the collective relief and sense of justice being served. Evelyn, once just another passenger, had now become a symbol of defiance and strength. Her resolve had not only challenged an injustice, but had sparked a wider conversation among the passengers and beyond. People began to share the video widely across social media platforms, captioning their posts with calls for change and highlighting the need for a reevaluation of policies within the transit authority. In the days following the incident, local news outlets picked up the story, and Evelyn was invited to speak at community forums and schools about her experience. Her message was clear and resonant: stand firm in the face of injustice, and be the catalyst for change you wish to see. Her story inspired others to come forward with their own experiences of discrimination, galvanizing the community to demand more substantial changes within the transit system and other public services. The impact of Evelyn's defiance went beyond just a victory against one misguided bus driver. It stirred the consciousness of the community, prompting discussions on civil rights and the importance of standing up against discrimination. The Transit Authority, faced with mounting public pressure and negative media coverage, initiated a series of workshops and seminars on racial sensitivity and customer service for all their employees. Evelyn's act of courage had turned her into a local hero, admired not just for her refusal to move but for her ability to speak truth to power in a way that ignited a spark within the community. As the narrative of that day on the bus continued to unfold, the broader implications of her victory became clear. It wasn't just about one bus ride, it was about challenging and changing the status quo, about ensuring that no one else would have to endure what she did. In what ways do you think individual acts of courage can lead to widespread change? Have you ever witnessed or participated in a moment that led to a larger discussion or transformation in your community? The dust settled quickly after the confrontation between Evelyn and Whitman, but the ripples of the incident spread far and wide. The video of Evelyn standing her ground became viral, shared thousands of times across social media platforms. People from all walks of life commented on her courage and the necessity of standing up against injustice. Local news channels picked up the story, catapulting Evelyn to the forefront of a renewed dialogue on racial discrimination and public accountability. In the days that followed, the bus company faced immense public scrutiny. Calls for systemic changes to their training programs and customer service policies grew louder. Evelyn, who had been a quiet force of change in her community for years, found herself at the center of a significant societal shift. She was invited to speak at various community events and educational forums, where she emphasized the importance of resilience and the power of a single voice to instigate widespread change. The bus company, responding to the tidal wave of public demand, initiated a comprehensive review of their policies. They announced a series of workshops on racial sensitivity and inclusivity, aimed at fostering a more understanding and respectful interaction between their employees and the public. These changes marked a promise for future improvements that could potentially transform everyday experiences for countless passengers. Evelyn's personal reflection on the event revealed a deep sense of fulfillment mixed with a hopeful outlook for the future. She saw her experience not just as a personal victory but as a beacon for others who might find themselves facing similar injustices. If my standing up makes it easier for even one person to feel safer and more respected, then it was all worth it, Evelyn shared during an interview, her words resonating with many who had seen her stand firm. As the story of that fateful bus ride continued to unfold, the moral became clear: individual courage can indeed lead to significant societal change. The community, once a silent witness to everyday injustices, was now more aware and vocal. The impact of Evelyn's defiance and the subsequent changes in the bus company's policies served as a testament to the power of standing up and speaking out. What do you think are the long-term effects of such public standoffs on company policies and social attitudes? Have you ever seen a courageous act that led to positive change in your community?